So yeah, welcome everyone to the webinar today with Mixpanel in partnership with SEA Founders. It's going to be a really great session going into, as you can see on the screen, the blueprint to measure and scale your business. And really, this is going to be focusing on the metrics that matter for your business to grow across across your products. If you just want to skip to the next slide, Paishan, I'll just introduce some of the speakers here today. So my name's Scott Pugh. I lead the APAC business for Mixpanel. Very quick introduction to Mixpanel. If you don't know already, we essentially invented the concept of event-based tracking. So we are still a startup, but 12 years old, and we work with companies across the globe to help them understand their users, understand their user journeys, and be able to build better products. And with that, we're going to have our head of professional services, Paishan, come in and give you some insight on how we consult businesses in Southeast Asia, across APAC, across the globe, on how they should think about metrics for their business and picking the right product metrics to drive growth. And then we're really delighted to be joined by AIM, Amrit, and Dr. Tan. Amrit is one of the founders of, or a board member of SEA Founders, which you'll get in a bit more detail. But it's a collective here in Southeast Asia of Series A, Series B startup founders, and sort of a community and advisory services. Dr. Tan is the CEO and co-founder of Finaxar, and is also an advisor and investor in the region here. So really looking forward to getting their take on the metrics that matter for their businesses, but also the metrics that matter when they are investing in companies and what they look for in founders and people that are building businesses, and some sort of war stories from companies that they've worked with in the past. So fantastic. We're going to, just in terms of, we want to be able to hear from you, hear any questions that you might have for either Paishan, myself, or the panelists. So feel free to dive into the Q&A session on Zoom. I think everyone should be au fait with using Zoom by now over the past year and a half. But please, we'd be happy to hear from you and hear any questions you might have. The Q&A button is located just at the bottom of the screen there. So with that, let me hand over to Paishan Tan, who leads our professional services, to talk about our product metrics. Paishan, over to you.
Thanks. So hi everyone. I'd just like to take a few minutes to share, to talk about product metrics and why we think, first of all, why it's important to get a deep understanding of your product analytics. That is how your users behave on your product, because this goes a long way to help you understand, firstly, if you do have the right product market fit, and secondly, if you are growing your users, what sorts of users they are. And then in this vein, it's important to have a framework to kind of organize your questions. And that is because understanding user behavior is more complex than ever today. So we're in the age where processing power is such that you can track anything and everything. So every single page view, impressions, link clicks, search words, duration on page, button clicks, anything you could possibly want. The problem is not not being able to track things. The problem is having way too much data. And we actually and this is not a problem unique to just a few companies or startups. We actually surveyed over 450 product managers globally. And 50% actually indicated that they don't feel like they have the right tools to get answers, to understand behavior such as conversions and where users drop off, what users retain, and what drives them to retain, and how customers are using their product. So I think that's why it's helpful to have some kind of measurement framework in which to help you determine, based on your larger company strategy, the kind of key questions you need to answer. And it also helps you align your stakeholders and your teams towards that shared vision. So with that, what makes a good product metric? So I like this quote that I saw, like someone posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, because I think it captures the essence of a lot of confusion that arises when product teams start with metrics that they think are important. For example, like session time, total screen views, rather than the questions that they need answered. But to be clear, there is no one size fits all answer. So this will vary by industry and the maturity of the company. So for instance, for like startups, the one key question that you may be trying to answer today is the validation of your product market fit. So one thing, like, if you had one key product metric to align your organization on, what is that one key metrics that would matter most to your business, and how do you go about thinking about it? So for us, like, what we kind of try to advise customers to think about is, what is that key action? If users are actively using your product properly, and that there is market fit, what is that key action that they will be doing on your product? And how frequently are they using it? So you'll have a hypothesis when you start building your product. And tracking this metric can help you validate your hypothesis, as well as to help you measure and further optimize on your performance. So here are some examples of focus metrics for some products across a whole range of industries. Like I said, there is no one size fits all. So depending on your product, whether it's B2B or B2C, you may have different personas that have different needs and different frequencies that they need to use your product for. So we can talk through a couple examples from this slide. So looking at Twitch, for instance, it's a live streaming platform. They may be going after a user persona that watches at least like maybe 5+ minutes of live streaming on a weekly basis. So this might be enough for Twitch to count them as an active user. But if you look at another company, like another streaming company, Netflix, for instance, they may actually be looking for users who watch at least like 1 hour of video a week. And then another example we can talk through on this slide is like DocuSign. Their key action today could be users who actually signs a contract digitally, right? And depending on that persona of the user, they may be looking for users who actually signs a contract at least once a month, and then use that as their focus metrics. I'd like to talk through like some of the top tips when it comes to like picking out what these focus metrics should be. I think the first one is like, tied to customer value, not so much revenue. We're not saying that revenue isn't important. And this is obviously like one of the key metrics that the VCs will look at when they evaluate your business. But in of itself, it's not so much an actionable metric for product managers. So what's important is to focus on a product metric that is actually tied to customer value and not to a company value. Because the customers are paying you because they think that the service you provide is valuable. So when you help your customers find value in your product, this will then help drive your revenue. So I see a question from Tina that asks, like, are these real metrics or suggestion of what the metric could be? Yeah, that's a great question. This is actually a suggestion, right? We don't actually know, for instance, like Twitch doesn't necessarily share with us like what their focus metrics could be. But it's, what we think, if you are a product manager, you say, okay, what is the use case of Twitch, for instance, or what is the use case for Netflix? Netflix use case could be like, they want people to come and watch videos for entertainment, right? And then they think about it, okay, so how often do they want them to watch the videos? At least once a week, maybe like at least two or three times a week. And how much time do they want them to watch? So if you're a product manager and you're building a product, you should have a sense of like, this is who you're building for. This is the persona you're building for. So once you have that, that qualitative metric set out, then you can actually like start to validate it like by tracking the numbers and then seeing like whether that plays out or not. But coming back to the second top tip here is that the second point is that the metric should be a leading indicator of success. So revenue tends to be a lagging metric because it could ignore the start of the funnel, where the addressable audience is that you want to get to your platform, and the customers that you want to activate. So you want to be able to capture them right before, or you want to be able to like grow to, the start of the funnel and not have that flag, because by the time you see revenue fall, you may not be able to address the earlier part. And the third point is, at the end of the day, you need to remember that you cannot measure everything, especially as a startup, right? There's so many things that you need to do already. You won't have time to actually like track every single metric or event. If you do that, then what happens often we see with our customers is that they end up like spending too much time on implementation, but they can't actually quickly get to the metrics that they want to start answering questions. So don't fall into that trap of analysis paralysis. But so for example, when you think about like Mixpanel, our focus metrics for us is the number of weekly active users who manage to find answers to their questions. Now, the best way or the foolproof way of getting that metric might be asking users every time they spend some time on our platform. By the time they leave, if they have actually managed to find the answer that they were looking for. But that's not very feasible, and it can be a very irritating user experience. So instead, we try to use proxies. Like, for example, we look at whether users have managed to save a report, have managed to share that report with someone, and we use as a proxy to say, hey, they have managed to find an answer to that question, to that problem. So I would say that the focus metric in and of itself should give you a good sense of how users are actively engaged doing the key action on your platform, and if that number is actually increasing over time. But looking at that one number, obviously, is not going to be enough. What you want to do is be able to address and understand your entire customer lifecycle. And that's where the framework, or having some kind of framework, will help you organize your analysis. So for instance, you can see that reach, if you talk about reach, it will give you a sense of the size of your addressable market. And if you're getting an increasing number of users into that platform based on your marketing tactics. And then if we talk about activation, it gives you a sense of the ease with which users onboard and begin using your platform. So if your sign-up process is actually very complicated, or it doesn't quickly get your users to see the value, and then they drop off, now that's an area that you can see, and then you know that you need to address. And then when we talk about engagement, it'll be helpful to break the users down by the different buckets of usage. Are you able to break them down into not just like, okay, what's the average usage of the key action on your product? That's the focus metric, right? But can we actually dive deeper? Can we see like who the casual users are versus the core users and the power users? And can we track that journey over time? Are like casual users moving into the core users and then moving into the power users? Or is it reversing? And then we come to retention, and that's the really important metric, right? Because it tells you if your product is actually sticky enough for the long haul. So your active users, it may be going up and to the right? But if the bulk of these users are actually based on new users that you bring in, and your existing users are actually falling, now that's a red flag. So the question to ask here is like, how many of your new users, let's say X months ago or X like weeks ago, again, that time frame depends on what your natural frequency of your product is. So how many of your new users like X period ago are still actively using your product today? So I just kind of want to end with a couple like best practices. So in general, the way we think about how you can define your product metrics, you can think about call it like the 4 M's and T framework, which is the first M is like, is it meaningful? Does it align with the values of your organization? Are your customers getting value out of your product? And are you getting meaningful information from your user's journey? And the second M is it measurable? Can you actually quantify it? Because sometimes the questions that you want to ask is, if you can't quantify it, you can't track it, you can't optimize it. And the third one is it manageable? Can you actually develop initiatives to improve upon it? Are there any actions that you can take? And is it movable? You actually don't want a metric that is like not really stable, doesn't move at all. Because if it doesn't move, then it's not very interesting, right? This is not a metric that you can actually take action on. It might be a metric that you track on the side, but as a key metric, you want to be able to drive improvements on it. And then the last one is it time bound? is it trackable in like a very time sensitive way? So again, it has to be like movable in that sense. And now I'll end off with this, like, what are the kinds of metrics to avoid? So you can think about it as like, the first one is vanity metrics. So don't actually, it doesn't really correlate, or doesn't necessarily correlate with metrics that matter. A lot of customers still come to us and say, hey, can we actually measure the duration, the session duration that they spend on the product? Actually, we talk to like, but actually that doesn't really matter, right? Because like, for example, if you're a telco customer and you have like an app and you want your users to come in and recharge, you don't necessarily want them to spend like hours on your platform. It really depends on your product usage. What you want them to do is come in, be able to recharge and then get out. And you may not even want them to come in like and recharge like multiple times a week. You might want them to just like, do a big recharge once a month and that's it. So you have to ask, like, what are the key metrics that matter? Don't just measure like page views, screen time, or like all the button clicks. You have to know what you want to track and then just go for those. And then the second point is like, be careful about lagging metrics. Lagging metrics could be like, they measure the output, right? These are good to know and these are important to know. But if you actually look at leading metrics, they can actually help you anticipate and actually predict what will happen to your product, whether the users will end up growing, whether your revenue will end up growing or not. And then the other point is like, be careful about like having too many correlated metrics. It'll be a lot faster and more efficient if you just, if you know that a couple of the metrics are kind of similar, if you like click submit on the form and the form means that the user will have successfully like purchased, you don't need two different metrics, you just need one. And then the last point I want to add here is like, just, avoid metrics that you can easily manipulate. So you can include them in your framework as secondary metrics to support your primary metrics, but don't focus on that. Cool, that's all I had. And maybe I'll turn it back over to you, Scott.
Excellent. Thanks, Peishan. And yeah, really want to welcome any questions from the hundreds of people we've got on the stream here. But I mean, a quick question from me on the framework that you shared there before we go to the full panel is, how do you? I mean, obviously setting these metrics up is really important, but what about changing them as your product develops, as your teams develop? Like how sort of flexible do you need to be around these metrics as you set them up from the beginning, and how often should you be reviewing them? Peishan, did you hear that? You're still on mute.
Oh, how often you should? Sorry, I thought it was a question for like.
Yeah, no, that's a question to you, Peishan. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. How often should you be reviewing your metrics? That's a great question. It actually goes back to like, how often does your product vision change, right? Like if your key metrics should always align to what your company vision is. So if your company vision for, let's say, like the first 3 to 6 months is, oh, we really want to focus on growth, let's just get the acquisition in, and then we can worry about like the key actions or the real activation, the engagement actions later on, then your focus metrics really could be on the acquisition journey and the activation journey, and not so much on what users do on your platform. So it really boils back to like, what is your company vision?
Yeah, agree, and that sort of that paves the way for Dr. Tan and AIM to join and sort of discussing some of the visions of the companies that they work with, that they work for, and that they consult, advise, and invest in. Firstly, I'd actually just like you to introduce yourself. We'll go sort of clockwise as it stands on my screen. And Dr. Tan, please, just if you'd like to sort of introduce yourself and a bit of your background and also the company that you work for now.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. So thanks for the opportunity to be here on this panel. I have been doing startups since the 90s, actually. And it's very fun, it's very engaging. So the first company that I seed invested in and developed the technologies for where I got my first patents and all, is a company called Immersion. Ticker symbol in the NASDAQ is IMMR. And we did the, well, I'm sure everybody inside, this entire forum has played with PlayStation before. So every time you shoot something and the PlayStation vibrates, right, that's actually our technology, which we put inside there. Same for BMW's iDrive system, or today you can see it on this fellow. Apple actually still uses a couple of our patents. From then, I got really lucky, had an IPO in January of 2000. And immediately after that, I sold all my shares, and not more than 5-6 weeks, right after I sold my shares, the entire stock market collapsed. And that was when the entirety of the guys who actually stayed with the company were writing nasty messages to me via SMS in those days, to the tune of "you lucky, censored," right, kind of thing. From that point in time, I took a couple of years off.
You're not just a doctor, you're also an oracle. You can see into the future, Dr. Tan.
Now, actually, the decision is very simple, right? The Internet Explorer said that we were worth almost $1 billion. And I'm looking at down the corridor and I can see inventory for 20 million. And then the eureka moment is, all right, this is a lottery. I just scored. It's time to get the hell out, right? So that's basically the sum of it. After that, I was really lucky to be introduced to the chief scientist of Israel. Her name at that point in time was Orna Berry. She was one of the partners at Gemini Israel Funds, one of the premier VC funds in Israel back then. And I was brought in to coach these crazy bunch of kids that were fresh out of the army from some special units, let's put it that way. And they came up with a technology to scan in real time in 3 dimensions. And they were extremely good in what they did. The snapshot is this fellow, which is Face ID of Apple now. They were sold to Apple in 2013 for about close to $400 million. After that, I was approached by Monk Hill Ventures in Singapore by the managing partner, who actually the Israelis introduced me to. His name is Peng Sin. And so he asked me to see whether I'd be interested in coming back to Southeast Asia. I thought about it, finally accepted, raised a substantial portion of the first fund for Monk Hill, and since then stayed as an operating advisor. And from that means, I basically get called into various things to help the company, right? Kind of like an on-call fireman sort of thing. And that was when we had the idea to start FinXR, because we saw that there was a gap in terms of the working capital needs of small businesses in Southeast Asia, and how to approach or help that working capital need by using technology to fulfill these working capital needs, right? It's a very large market.
Yeah.
So our final iteration, right, of that product out there is currently out there now. Scott, if you could, put this in the chat, I'd really appreciate it. It's called Flex. We are one of the principal partners of Visa. And we have a very unique product out there right now. And I'd encourage anybody in Singapore or Southeast Asia to have a look at it. And yeah, that's about it from my end.
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm keen to sort of talk more as well about Flex. I know it's been an interesting pivot for you, and it's helping startups get access to capital and be able to grow their business efficiently. AIM, I'd love you to introduce yourself as well. I know that you're, as the sort of board member of SEA Founders as well. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into the SEA Founders community.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I think my claim to fame is past decade started Talent's first co-working space in the technology and media conference company, and a show of 20,000 people in Texas. All that was great and well until COVID happened. I became, my skills were no longer very highly valued and prized, and did a bit of a soul searching. In that time, SEA Founders, that was originally started by one of the Monks Hill partner Peng, Song Kang, Roger Hamilton, and Thomas Labutka, has been going on since 2017. That really needed to find new leadership to reinvigorate the network. I think the network has always been very strong, but it was at the point where everybody was getting very busy, and that I was, like, as I mentioned, pretty free. So between me and 5 other board members, we're led by a fearless chairwoman, Anna Gong of Perks Technology, the CEO. And over the past 4 or 5 years, we've actually, through our almost this community that's entirely and completely nonprofit and member powered, we've been helping startups that are really at the kind of the fork in the road. The toughest part of going from the scrappy seed stage company to becoming Series A button up and to explode in the Southeast Asia and global market. A lot of people die along the way. The growing pains of making that big leap from entrepreneur to business builder, manager, dealing with boards, dealing with hundreds of people in the team. It was a journey that's overwhelming for most, but with other networks that existed, they're great, like EO, YPO, but a lot of those are not designed specifically for digital people. And I think we have a few different quirks within our community, a lot of very challenging models. Entrepreneurs are depressed by nature, but startup entrepreneurs are 4 times as likely to be depressed because of the speed and the intensity in which we throw ourselves at the problem. So, we've have an average member age, if you see on the website, 30, but actually we do call on a wealth of gray hair and experience. Like
no hair, no hair.
I didn't want to say that joke, but you said it yourself. We do have a lot of this incredible mix of founders who've exited over and over again and are now part of the network, and new, rock stars that are going to be the next heroes of their ecosystem. And we come together and talk about the deepest, most intimate issues that you can ever think about openly, because we're there to share, we're there to learn from one another and grow this tribe of high growth startup entrepreneurs together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's so important, as you mentioned, for founders to have that support network, for people to lean on, to learn from, and yeah, we've got a big startup community on the call today. And so, going back to the sort of core focus for the webinar, I'm keen to understand from you 2 gentlemen, what of the startups and scale ups that you've advised, what are the sort of some of the common metrics that you see them measure? I know that we focused on product metrics here as well, but yeah, as sort of like advisors and investors, what are some of the common metrics you see them to help them grow their business and get investment? And I suppose I'll start with you, Dr. Tan, if you could share your insight there.
Sure. I mean, broken down right into it, it's a very simple classification exercise that you go to, right? You've got traffic that you need to measure that's coming into your site. They may be interested, they may not be interested. And then the big question comes, how do you actually acquire them, right, into your funnel? And acquiring them and putting them all the way through in order for them to become repeat customers implicitly requires a journey or journeys, right, depending on how you structure your product. And finally, right, there is a question of, all right, how do you keep, in this day and age, right, people entertained, or rather, if you are in a more serious business like ours in the financial community, how do you actually make sure that they repeatedly transact, right? So what is your strategy around engagement and retention that you want to build yourself off on? So that's how I would classify things.
Yeah, excellent. And for you, Aim, please.
Yep. So I did forget to mention that during COVID, I also picked up a bad habit of angel investing, aka gambling. So I've done 12 deals over the past 5 months. But as we see the startups that come to the co-working space and the ones that I do, I see almost like a younger version of myself. I'll come to a meeting covered full of vanity metrics. We'll pull every number we can that looks good: users, GMV, orders, revenue, number of transactions per month, growth, customer retention rate, basket size, CAC, LTV, but not really understanding what those metrics really mean, or are they truly driving growth? So for an example, personally, one chance that I pitched and I got my butt handed to me by an investor was like, I go to a meeting and I say like, I've got 20,000 people that come to my co-working space, and maybe 10 people brought a package that month. And then some other month, some other number will be like, well, I had this one customer, but they rented out the entire half wing of the space, but it was a one-off. And this is an important example for a lot of e-commerce companies, which is like, is 1 million SKUs from 10 sellers, or 1 million sellers with 1 SKU each? Which one matters more? Which is better? So I think different businesses, as Peishan said, have different strategies, requires different metrics that are measured at different stages. And I think my problem, and I think this is also for a lot of founders, is sometimes we don't do such a great job as either board member or founder. So we're always running, so we don't figure out what the metrics that matter the most. And I think as an advisor now, looking at the new companies invest, everybody's always putting out fire. They're freaking out. So we always get the founders to focus on one, maybe no more than 3 metrics. And as the company matures and there's a bigger team, we'll be focusing around 3 to 5, never beyond 7. And I think if you'd like to read, the pro tip is Lean Analytics. That was a really good book. And one that really got me to understand that different metrics are more valuable. And it's kind of goes up a ladder. You have to achieve this number, and then this is important. But, as you go up, these numbers matter more and more. Is a post by NFX, which is a fund called Ladder of Proof. And that really changed my life of understanding that certain metrics matter more than others. But more importantly, revenue, while we always think and talk about it, it's the base of that revenue where we get there is all about customer value.
Yeah, I mean, lean analytics is a great example. And I just, before we go back to Dr. Tan, I've got a question about financial. I'd just like to understand, Aim, you've invested in 12 seed companies over the last year. Could you give us an example of one of those? And you mentioned that they're like having like 3 core metrics, what those metrics might have been and why it grabbed your attention and was able to sort of to seal your investment to the extent that you can. I can imagine you're under NDA for a few of them, but to the extent that you can share share some of those details.
Oh, we have one that a lot of the Thai super angels done. It's called WeChef, and it's quite simple actually. It's a platform to help connect food trucks to opportunities to set up their shop, whether it's in shopping malls, gated communities, in street markets, whatnot. It doesn't sound like the world's most exciting business, but what we've noticed from a quick market survey is number of food trucks literally doubled during COVID. A lot of shops were coming out of malls. They could no longer afford the rent, and the trucks can always go to where the customers are. What we realized was that WeChef was crushing it in terms of the number of communities that they'd already have on a Facebook group, but also the number of trucks that they were signing up and converting to join their platform. So their metric that matter for this such an early stage was, I need to get as many trucks onto the platform as possible, because right now it's it went from like 2,005 to 5,000. And I'm the only player in town. But I think over time, one of the metrics we're going to need to start to focus more on is actually being able to help those truckers make money. How are they converting? Are they booking more and more slots over the course of a day? And how much are they transacting through us? And as we also have a POS partner, in one of the investors, I think over time, as the business grow, we're going to start to track transactions. But at this very fundamental early stage, we went with metrics that matter. We're going to grab the entire market and get them to sign up to become part of the WeChef crew.
WeChef. It sounds like a brilliant concept. Love a food truck.
It did remind me a bit about
a lot
about WeWork, though. As a co-working guy, that name is dreaded.
Yeah. And to you, Dr. Tan, obviously you've been an investor and advisor to startups, but with Finexa, you're like the group CEO, and so I think that would you say that you look for different metrics as an investor to actually running and owning the business? Like how does that differ, and how do you think about metrics within the Finexa business? What are the key metrics that you work towards?
Okay, I'd like to think, right, that being stronger in one, right, being the group CEO makes me stronger in the other, investing, and also vice versa, right? Because, you know, the more that you understand exactly what is coming from a VC standpoint and understand why a VC is asking those questions, it makes you become a sharper CEO, right? Because a lot of it boils down to, can you make the most successful negotiator I've ever met was my mentor in Silicon Valley. He was a Stanford professor, and he was Warren Buffett's buddy, okay? And he was old school. I asked him one day why he was so successful as a negotiator. And he said this to me. He said, it's very simple. I just give people what they want. And I go like, that doesn't sound like negotiation. He goes, no, but you don't understand. Trying to get people to really say what they want is very different from what they say they want, right? So in that regard, right, you know, you kind of get good, right, by juggling those things as a CEO, as well as putting on that investment hat, right? That's one thing. Now, with regard to Finexar's journey, we've been around for 4 years now, right? And the reason why we moved right onto Flex, while still accomplishing, I might add, you know, the corporate mission of helping SMEs, right, in terms of working capital, is that we realized that that's the fastest way you can scale any kind of loan-based product. Now, why? Because this, first of all, the whole process of analyzing, forget about analyzing, selling a loan is very, very different from selling a piece of plastic, or in our case, virtual and plastic, out there to a company and say, hey, you've got 35 days of free credit. All you need to do is just basically sign up here, and you get an in-principle approval of up to $100,000 within 48 hours, right? It takes me 15 minutes to sell it, tops, to a business. Whereas if you go right in the whole basis of trying to sell a loan, you have to ask questions like, what are your day sales outstanding? What are your days payable outstanding? You know, how do you actually determine right that cash flow gap? Most companies don't realize that they have a cash flow gap. And they don't understand what products are being sold to them. And the sales cycle was fundamentally too long. The conversion rates were not great, right? We did the pivot, and I'm very happy to say that, you know, as of right now, just within the last week, right, we're averaging 10 leads, 10 companies coming to us per day, right? And so you can imagine the trajectory that we're on right now. We just launched about a month ago. So, you know, we're making preparations now for having thousands, right, of companies right now under our umbrella with our products. And it's getting to the point where banks are calling us up. People, very, very senior people are quitting banks to actually join us. And yeah, so things are good from our perspective. And I think a couple of my team members are on this webinar right now. So Jason and Joshua, you know, if you can just say hi by waving your hand. Okay. That's it.
Hey, Jason, Joshua. And so this is the Flex product, the credit that essentially gives a Flex credit card to startups with immediate access to capital with like 35 days of interest-free credit line, right? And so you talked, and actually it fits quite nicely into Payshan's the product metrics outline, which is you talk about the reach, and that is your, like, at the moment you're getting 10 per day, but then it's the activation. How many of them are getting the point, and at what point is that? Do you see that as like full activation? And then you move into the engagement, and then following that retention.
Right.
And yeah, sorry, please. Yeah, so
No,
it kind of
ahead,
fits, and yeah. No, I was going to say it kind of fits within those metrics, and I was going to say like and back to sort of Payshan's point, like have you sort of defined those metrics for each of those steps of the I know the product is really early, but where are you at in the process of defining those metrics?
We are very lucky to have, right, probably the best marketeer, right, in Singapore working with us. I've made her a senior advisor to the company already. Her name's Olivia. And Olivia Leong is the CEO and founder of Vera Asia. And what she's, okay, it may be a little bit unfair, but she used to be the head of business sales for the Asia Pacific for Visa. So not only is she a talented marketing person, right, she fully understands the business, right? So by working together with her, we are able to really draw up a 23-step process. Why 23 steps? Because we've looked at best practices of all kinds of card companies that are out there, all the metrics that they have, everything from how you segment the teams into various groups, right? One is responsible for customer acquisition, the other one is responsible for customer success, where they fall into each bucket, what the metrics are for each step of that 23-step journey that they take on, like really funnel based, right? Because, within those things also comes a credit process, right? Which is automated. And so it's like managing a symphony orchestra, and you have to have, every single piece of it working. All the way through till day-to-day operations, right? Your customer success people, what are the metrics? How many are they turning over? How fast do issues get resolved? What kind of clients are basically coming through the door? Do you need strategic sales because they're bigger accounts? Whole host of questions, right, that you basically need to answer. And we've got all our SLAs nailed, right? Quite frankly. And we have alerts set for every single one of them using the combination of Zendesk. And we also do use Mixpanel. And my team is actually analyzing that right now. And we use for our CRM Active Campaign because it's the most flexible system that we've got. We were on Salesforce before, but it just doesn't work for us. Right, so that's about it.
Glowing reviews, unpaid, by the way. That's good.
That wasn't even instigated. Yeah,
I advertise because I believe in the products, right? And I'm very hard-nosed about things that don't work. If they don't work, I throw it out.
Yeah, no, that's that really interesting. Like your 23-step process, and I mean, fintech is probably one of the most complicated sectors to be able to operate in and run startups in. But if you can figure it out, I mean, you look at companies like Stripe and that have just had the valuations there. I mean, I started from LinkedIn, which was started by an ex-PayPal mafia who Reid Hoffman, who actually had the opportunity to invest in Stripe and said, no, the fintech market's too difficult, payments is too difficult, so he avoided it. But yeah, it's definitely a hot sector at the moment. And so AIM, I'm interested if you like in sharing a little bit about to expand upon what you look for in companies that are coming. You kind of touched on it a little bit around the We Chef, but for companies that are going from that seed phase to actually then go to the VC funding, like how do you need to get your business in order to be ready for that next stage? I mean, for SEA Founders, primarily, I understand Series A and Series B. So yeah, what does it take to get to that next stage?
Sure. I mean, I'll answer in two parts. One is definitely, we talk about data as new oil, but most companies don't even know how to make data-driven decisions. And I think it's the same, with both Mixpanel, trying to understand your customer. You also need to understand what drives investors, and they might have conviction or believe in you, but they need to build a confidence and a case to their investment committee based on the data of your business. And I had the unfortunate experience going to a meeting, half stressed out, definitely underslept, and didn't know where my data were, and got the worst hammering of my life. I was so ashamed of myself that I had to look around the room, ask people like, where's this data? Why does the number look like that? And the investor was not impressed. Whether do I know my own business? Do I have depth and breadth of understanding what's going on in the whole company, what's being measured? And I think if you only talk about it and never really walk the walk in terms of being a data metrics driven company, I think it will show very quickly, and it'd be just very hard as the business gets really big to actually know if you're headed in the right direction. So I think on the other hand, what do I look at? Advice as companies continue to evolve. I think, it's really metrics. The most important one is about measuring progress and growth. As you've said, input metrics rather than outputs and GMV. And I think that relentless, hard-nosed drive to measure until it no longer is important is very important and interesting. I think I'll go back to the We Chef example, right? I think a lot of, and many other e-commerce companies, they always tout the top line GMV numbers, right? But I think if you focus on optimizing your conversion rates, your GMV, like We Chef, if you just keep converting the food truckers, the GMV will naturally rise, and that as the conversion rate improves. But I think at some point, you're going to get to a state where the conversion rate optimization efforts for the company is going to produce diminishing returns, which means it's already at optimal. Then, like many other companies, it's time to now to think about other focuses. Maybe it's returning customers, new customers, or average order value, expanding into new categories, product offerings. So I think spend time figuring those important metrics with you and your team is going to be the focus for any founder for the next 3, 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Ayman. So I was just going to say GMV is gross merchandise value, right? Gross merchandise value. Yeah. Sorry, Dr. Tan. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, no problems. Just to add to what Amrit was saying, right? We look in the fintech business as in terms of being tied to customer value. It's very clear, right? If you visit the website, you'll be able to see how we've managed to sharpen it to just the basics of what businesses want, right? And this was done before we launched, right? With very detailed market studies out there. Not just that, we also understood, right, what our competitors were offering, right? We understood their weak spots. And so we crafted the product as such. That's number one. Now, how do I measure customer value coming in? It's very simple. If we did our jobs right, then we should be able to have a almost fully automated registration and also analysis process to come through as a client, because we know we're actually giving money out to them, right? You're actually loaning money. As of right now, we have over 40%, right, of our traffic coming in goes all the way through, right through to the final stages without any human intervention, right? And the difference between us and our competition is because we've got people with decades of experience. I mean, our group head of credit, right, used to be the head of enterprise credit for DBS Bank in Hong Kong, right? So our chair used to be the head of global trade finance for HSBC. So we understand really how to drive a lending business without losing our shirts, okay? And by combining the technology and combining their experience, right, we're able to come to a happy medium or a happy tension between what is necessary to be aggressive and how you keep that tension in having accurate credit and have an acceptable delinquency ratio, right? And I can just say that right now our delinquency ratio is way too good. It's under 1%, right? Which is actually ridiculously low. It's, I mean, even quite a lot of banks can't beat us, right? So we're looking to be a little bit more aggressive right now. Now, in terms of, that's a leading indicator, right? You know, the number of companies that actually go through the entire sign-up process, how quick they actually do the sign-up process, how fast they actually get the lines from us, but that's an SLA issue that you basically convert. And then finally, right, we are just starting to get in the data in terms of customer satisfaction. And that switch is ongoing right now, but our salespeople are on top of all the large accounts and all, constantly being there. And this is where experience counts. If there's any one piece of advice, right, I want to give to everybody out there, it's this, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? Don't go and measure everything under the sun, because, you know, if you can't see the forest for the trees, right, you're just gonna waste so much time and you're gonna burn so much money. And at the end of the day, it's not gonna translate, right, to revenues for you, right? And at the end of the day, if I were an investor looking at the thing, my fundamental questions would be, do you know how to make money? Do you have a team that knows how to make money and can work well together? And have you got a good idea, right? Those are the three things.
And leads perfectly onto a couple of questions that we had in the Q&A section that you mentioned there. One around team, one around actually looking at some more qualitative feedback from your customers and understanding the sort of difference between quantitative and qualitative, and be able to sort of understand the user empathy. How would you suggest to do that? How do you do that within your business, Dr. Tan? And how would you suggest actually getting that that qualitative feedback?
You know, we definitely put online, right, as you use our apps, surveys out there. We have the NPS completely set up. We've got recorded phone lines basically coming in for our customer service teams to make sure, right, the information is going out, is accurate, as well as the feedback which is coming in actually gets heard, right, in the right places for action. We compile everything into our internal systems, our knowledge bases, and all for action. We prioritize it, and we see how it fits, right, into our current release schedule in order to make sure that, you know, the most optimal use of time is being spent on it, and everything is weighted, okay? And everything is analyzed with a score in the end, so that we know when we go into executive level meets, right, you know, this feature is scoring, let's say 67 out of 100, right? Versus something that is scoring 20 something points, right? Then naturally the things that are scoring 67 points, right, have more priority in the queue in order for it to be implemented, right? And we make sure also when we implement, we do around, we don't implement in, especially for you product teams out there, don't do things in big groups, right? Why? Because the problem is that if you have a issue or a challenge, a technical challenge to solve, okay, and it becomes too complex or too difficult, right? You'll never be able to do it on time, ever, okay? Especially with today's technology. You have to break your problem up into manageable chunks in the shortest amount of times possible. This was done since the 90s, right? Microsoft used to have a daily build, right? You do the same thing.
Sprints.
You don't, yes, shorter sprints, right? The language has changed, but the idea is still the same. Manage the complexity by churning it out, having key teams, right, that are just solely focused, right, on being a task force that really quickly, rapidly prototype it out, super quick, super dirty, get it out, right? That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that kind of leads on to a question we've got in the chat from Raya. I think motivated team, like productive teams are motivated teams. If they feel like they're achieving things and moving forward and shipping product consistently, then the productivity increases and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I suppose the last question to you, Aim, was just around like how do you go about motivating teams, especially on metrics, and I'm paraphrasing Raya here, that they're slightly less in control of, like if the activation team are not entirely responsible or in control of the reach of their SEO, of being able to get people into the funnel for them. How do you go about sort of like keeping the teams motivated around metrics that they can't themselves influence or impact?
Go back to like building a strong people and culture of the organization, where while different sub teams may carry the individual metrics, but everybody needs to understand that they're building the whole company together. And if that mission, vision, values, and the whole kind of top piece of the company is not strong, and then doesn't cascade down into like every team exactly knows what needs to do, then I've literally saw this example today, which is the direction of the company keeps changing. So there is a complete paralysis of the operations team and the commercial team to do nothing, because the folks were like, well, if we do anything, it's going to be a waste of time. And I don't know what I'm going to be measured against in terms of whether I'm doing my job right. So I might just not do anything and just wait for somebody to tell me what to do. So you really don't want to be in that situation where either people are checked out, they're like, no, I can't do my job, boss, because that other team didn't do his job, and then the other team just points back and everybody in a circle. But you really want people to take empowerment and ownership of the business. But that also means being able to be transparent as much as you are with your angel investor and your customers. You're also transparent with your team, which is, maybe I've seen teams that rally when they're like, hi, we've got 6 months left of money. This is the cash in the bank. This is what we need to do. Are you in or are you out? Sometimes it doesn't work in Asia, and then all the staff's like, okay, boss, bye-bye, I'm out of here. But for the right teams, they're like, okay, we've got a shot at this. So what do we need to do? What do we need to fix? And a lot of that, people need that creative constraint. They need to know that they can't wait to iterate for the next 6 to 12 months. Like Dr. Tan said, we need to launch something, we need to test something, and we got to improve it. So, are we going to be that agile company, or are we just going to burn cash and then wait to see if the product fails on the market? I guess my last comment before our time's up is really, I think one of the biggest, most impactful thing I could have ever done, and why I can come and talk on this call, is really I had some of the most powerful board and mentors. So some of which, and I've met and hung out with SEA founders like T.Y. York, and now he's on the board of Hubba. We're co-investing as angel investors. We're best friends for life. And had it not been for him, I would have drove my company off the cliff and had no appreciation or understanding of metrics and management and everything. So I think for a lot of new founders, it's overwhelming. It's, you know, it's weird. I've read about it. Mixpanel does a lot of incredible blog posts. I don't know how to start. I don't know what to do. Everything looks good. I think my point is find somebody out there within the network or within SEA Founders that they've done it before. Like, I think Dr. Tan probably, you know, since the 90s, this is what, your 20th company, you know, he can tell you, you know, half asleep, like what you need to do to measure your business right.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's a really yeah, look out for mentors, people that can help advise, and SEA Founders is a great place for that. We are at time. We will be following up with everyone with the recording and answers to some of the other questions. My closing thing today, any of those that are interested in using Mixpanel, we do have a startup plan available with 50,000 credits to be able to use our growth plan online. I think, like the SEA Founders, we want to be able to support startups, to be able to help them grow, like Finexa and Flex. You know, we're here to see this community version, and really appreciate your time, Dr. Tan and AIM. Thank you very much for being so generous with it. I'm sure you'll get lots of LinkedIn connection requests and funding requests after this session. But yeah, thank you for being so generous. Thank you, Paishan, for sharing those metrics. I do recommend looking at the Guide to Product Metrics as a way to start setting out for. There's great examples within that book on and online to be able to show for different sectors what metrics you could and should be looking at. So thank you all, really appreciate it, and
thanks,
enjoy
Scott.
the rest of your evening.
Thanks, Paishan.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Sawadee krab.
Take care.
Bye.